Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Reiki Women Podcasts. My name is Michaela of Heartscapes Reiki and joined today with Bronwen Logan of Reiki with Bronwen. We are usually also joined by Carrie Varela of the Reiki Healing Society, but she is taking some time with her family because here in the United States, this is a holiday week. It is today, the 3rd of July, when we're recording this. You might be watching this or listening somewhere around the 4th of July, which in the United States is our Independence Day. And as we are kind of sitting with the energy of this holiday, all of these days that we focus our attention on that hold a particular theme, a particular meaning and importance to a large group of people, they carry a certain energy. And it's very worthy to explore how that energy works inside of our lives, what it really means to us beyond the pomp and circumstance of whatever the holiday has in store for us. And so we thought that it would be a really valuable time here on the podcast to discuss the question of Reiki and the individual. We are each individual people. We experience ourselves as separate and sovereign and particular, self-responsible. And yet we have this system of practice with the system of Reiki and many other practices in folks' lives that direct our attention towards our interconnection, towards our interdependence, and our not only logistical and cultural need for each other, but also our spiritual connection on a deeper level. And so we wanted to explore that today in this conversation. How does practicing the system of Reiki impact our experience of ourselves as an individual and our experience of ourselves as interconnected with the wider web of life? And I am excited about this conversation. I'd love to hear where you'd like us to start.
Wow, yes. Where do we start? I think you've said it all. I think we can finish now because that's it, right? No, I don't know. I'm already here, July the 4th in Australia. So I'm already independent, if you like. And I'm independent of Independence Day. And but am I really? So that is the question. Not really, because we are all interconnected. Yes, look at us. And it's amazing through time, through space, we are here together and doing this. So as an individual, yeah, I think it's interesting because we can only see ourselves really as an individual. I mean, from a spiritual perspective, we can see ourselves differently. But if I'm looking at myself, I can see my physical body, my physical surroundings, my computer. So, and I can touch that. So it all does feel quite separate. Life feels separate. And yet, if I think back to when we're born, we actually aren't separate. We are in another body and we're a part of that body, and we are using the same functions that body is using for our own functions. So we are not independent and we're not really an individual. We are a part of another being. And I find that really quite fascinating, the idea of birth. In the last week, I've two people I know have had babies, and it's, just the most joyous, amazing, wonderful thing, and such a miracle. And I love that reminder of that, because it is so special. And the reminder that, that people just go, oh my God, all of a sudden there wasn't a baby, now there is a baby. And, we move into this individual space, and you have this individual little being in front of you that now is breathing on its own, eating on its own, shitting on its own, it's doing all those things. And, I think for that baby, the shock of moving from being a part of something else and not having to do it all on their own to coming out into this world and being here is, that must be, I can't remember it, but it must be incredibly challenging. And it's the beginning of us as these beautiful individuals where we try to connect with others, be with others, understand our environment around us. So the system of Reiki, as far as I'm concerned, has been a real blessing with that, because it has given me a different perspective on life. It's actually told me that I am not on my own, and that the very simple practice of Joshin kokyu, which we always come back to, but just that simple breathing in and out is something that I did when I was a little baby in the womb. Yeah. And I'm still doing it now. And we're all doing it together. There is this whole breathing of the world in and out. Michaela, you and I, even though you're all the way over there and I'm all the way over here, we're still breathing in and out that same ether. And we are a part of it all. So the system of Reiki has been quite mind-blowing for me, because it's sort of, I guess, if I were to bring it around, it brings us back into that reminder that we are all like this. And that's really beautiful.
There is like so many fireworks going off in my mind right now as I'm sitting here. I love, we had a whole conversation about fireworks before we started this recording. Yeah, I love that you start with this like fundamental biological reality of all of our lives, where we start off utterly interconnected biologically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you could also argue, with our birthing parent. And then there's this fundamental separation that happens at birth that potentially has its impact on us. And then there's this period of time, and there's this parallel that's happening in my mind here that I'm going to try to flesh out. There's this period of time, generally is said by child psychologists to be around birth to going into our third year, where we still really fundamentally psychologically consider ourselves part of our parent still. We haven't individuated ourselves as a separate sovereign creature.
Yeah.
We're still, of course, physically very dependent on the adults in our life, but there's this psychological like sameness, oneness that is still present in our psychology. And the terrible twos, terrible threes is often seen as that period of time where all of a sudden we go, hang on, I am a separate, completely whole other being that has my own thoughts and feelings and can run over there if I want to, even if my parent is over there, right? And then, we have this whole childhood of learning to be our own self and hopefully getting good guidance about how to be a good solid individual while still being held in a loving container of togetherness and belonging. And then we have this system of Reiki that, when we look at it from its Japanese origins, tells us that we start off our life totally interconnected with life, and absolutely clear about that, knowing that we are part of this interconnected web, this much bigger than our one little tiny body, entity in the world. It's spacious, it's grounded, it's connected, it is love, and it's whole, and we are whole inside of it and it inside of us, right? This enlightened state of mind. And then life layers on distractions and challenges and pains and belief systems and all of the things that cause us to get off track with that, awareness. And then the system of Reiki is there to help us remember. And we often talk about, or I often talk about, remind us that when we're babies, we don't have to remember that we're interconnected because we just are still there mentally. And so in a certain sense, our mature adult self as a Reiki practitioner, I think what happened in my mind is like, why couldn't we hold on to that sense of knowing that we're interconnected as we grow up? But biologically, we need that period of differentiating so that we can navigate the world. We potentially, this is a theory, we need that pain of separation in a certain sense, and then to learn our sense of belonging in community and gain our sovereignty and our sense of self-responsibility so that we can be a functional member of society. And so in a certain sense, we need that. But then we also need something that can loop us back once we are in a mature form, once we are ready for more growth and transformation, that'll help us to remember that original state of mind of interconnection, while at the same time maintaining that sense of sovereignty and self-responsibility. Because if we don't, this is me now speaking from the perspective of a person who spent a lot of time in Codependence Anonymous, working through the unhealthy version of attachment that we call codependence, right? So we have independence. I am an independent being. I can pull myself up by my bootstraps. I can do everything that I need to do. I don't need help, right? I'm independent. And then we have codependent. I am not fundamentally okay unless everybody else around me is okay. And so I have to hyperfixate on everybody else because they need to be okay so that I can be okay. And I have to manipulate my life to make that true, right? Very exhausting way of being. Take it from me. And then we have interdependence, right? And what your example of how we are when we're born really brought up for me is that interdependence in our consciousness, right? It's just a fact, I think, in my belief system. Our interdependence is just a fact. Biologically, as an organism, we're interdependent with all of life. Spiritually, we're interdependent. But it's that, is our consciousness aware of it, right? And so interdependence is that dual, like simultaneous awareness that I am sovereign and I'm responsible for myself and I can make choices and have an impact in the world as an individual. And at the same time, I am part of everything else that's around me. And the system of Reiki gives us a way of like making our mind spacious enough to hold both of those things that seem like they might be in conflict.
That sounds like a baby. That's really weird. I'm so sorry. It's a cat, isn't it?
It's my cat, yeah.
It's like, we talk about babies and babies start crying.
All right, he's like, let me help you. Let me give you some sound effects in the background.
Sound effects in the background. Beautiful, beautiful. Oh, wow. Yeah, no, there's so much. I was thinking of a lot of things while you were talking there. And I wrote a few things down, but it reminded me a little bit about like, that I know that you did a thing on the labyrinth, and I also have done a thing on the labyrinth, and I have a labyrinth here. And the idea of a labyrinth that, we start in one space and we go through all these things and then we come back out and we're back at the same space where we started. And it seems like, was it useful to what is the point of having done all that? Because we're still back here again, right? And that's sort of what you were sort of talking about, I think, in a sense, because yes, it is useful. And yes, we are here. We're always here wherever here is. Yeah. And so the thing is that in doing that process, we are gaining, I don't know, awareness, I guess, consciousness, great, as you were saying. So more awareness about our lives. Which reminded me as well about the fact that when we're little, it's easy to learn a language, because our brain is more flexible. And when we're old, apparently it's easy to learn a new language. And I mean, older than me, because I still can't find it that easy. But, so this idea that once it's like a labyrinth, it's like where we start, we end, and yet there's all this happening in between. So we start off quite flexible, we end off quite flexible, but in the middle we have we try out all these different things, and we think we have to do this, and we have all these rules that we place on ourselves, and we do all of that, and they're things we take on. But then as we get older, hopefully our wisdom allows us to let go of a lot of that shit and just really allow ourselves to be much more in the flow and have that understanding of life, that we can be more flexible and that we don't need to be quite so prescriptive. So yeah, those are sort of my thoughts. And I think when we look at a baby, breathing, we always talk about that, but the baby breathing, the whole body is breathing. And that is really beautiful. It's because when we talk about Joshin kokyu, it's like this little baby is Joshin kokyu. That baby is just the perfect, just that perfect flow. And hopefully, when we do this full circle, and when we become old and we become like babies again, we go back into that beautiful natural flow again. And yeah, it's like life is a labyrinth. Yeah.
That is brilliant and just sparked all kinds of things. And my cat is absolutely screaming at me to let him out. So hold on just one sec. He's literally just like
Yeah.
yelling at me. Renus, out you go. Enough of your baby talk. All right, back into it. So again, you bring this metaphor forward that's like so juicy and delicious. This metaphor of the labyrinth, I love it. Um, yeah, the labyrinth has these three parts. The entering, the centering, and the returning. And I love this model that you're giving us of like as a baby we have this inherent body wisdom of interconnection, and as a great elder, perhaps even when we're in our moment of transitioning, we have that again. And can we bring it forward in our daily life when we're in that middle place? And so I love the idea of using the labyrinth in this way around coming to embodied day-to-day lived awareness of interconnection, because we've got that journey inward to the center. If we think about Joshin kokyu, right, this, which is a journey inward to the center of our body, of our being, of our center of gravity, of our energy. And then this, working with what does it mean to be me, myself, and also connected with all of life. And we do whatever that work looks like there at the center. And then we go into our integration period, right? Integrating what we've learned into our life. That's the return, moving back to where we started. And then we do it again, right? Right? Because it's like, it's not like we go into practice and then we get it all solved and we get it all figured out and we're enlightened and then that's it, right? It's like the system of Reiki gives us this really beautiful, like, gentleness, right? Just for today, I remember that I am enlightened. Just for today, I remember I'm interconnected. Tomorrow, I'm going to forget again, and then I'm going to walk it again. But these practices give us this like structure and this gentleness and this permission to try again and to try again and again, and that's not doing it wrong. That's the journey. That's what we're here to do. And when we take the time and we see that journey as worthwhile, and this was something I had to learn, because like when I first learned about the concept of enlightenment, right? And the idea that, essentially you could go to heaven when you're still alive, you could like come to a place of just walking joy and centeredness and all of the things. That felt like so unachievable. And it felt like such a radical goal that was going to be so hard that I might as well not even try. Like, why would I even try? It's too hard. That's too big of a goal. And when I encountered the system of Reiki and got tricked into it because I wanted to be a healer and like heal other people, because again, super codependent at the time. I wanted to use my Reiki magic to make everybody else feel good so that I could feel good. Slowly realizing, oh, that's not what it's about, right? It's about coming back into my own wholeness and then sharing that outward with others as I move through the world. I all of a sudden was integrating a system of practice that said, no, it's not about toiling at this work for years and years and years, and then bam, you're enlightened. It's about, what's today look like? What does this moment look like? What does that walk of the labyrinth today look like? what is it that I'm integrating this day that can help me feel more like myself, like my true and whole self, which includes feeling interconnected. And slowly, gently, with kindness, with compassion, with reiteration, with trying again, with, being patient with myself and forgiving myself, more and more and more, there's more moments of feeling like that duality is coming together into a non-dual me. I am an individual, I'm sovereign, I'm self-responsible, and I'm inextricably connected to the rest of life at the same time. And those moments of feeling that bring such an incredible feeling of freedom, which was another topic we thought about talking about today. This idea of freedom, and what does that feel like, and what does that really mean inside of all of the constraints of our life. This is part of how Reiki would answer that question, I think.
Yeah, I mean, though, talking about that feeling, that sense, and how that feeling draws you forward into your practice. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And the system is set up for that, because that's what Reiju is in many ways, right? So when we experience Reiju, we have moments of, and also other aspects of the system of Reiki, but specifically Reiju, I feel is that has that intent, that when we sit in that space and we just think, this feels really, I don't know, people can describe it in many different ways, but like home, like this is this is a space I feel right in. And often there's not a lot of times where we feel right in our life. Yeah. And because we are always trying to please others, or whatever it might be, whatever the thing is that we're trying, always trying. But if we are sitting back into that, and we feel that, then when we know that space, and we're like, I can actually, which is what you were just saying, I love that, I can actually, I can be there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real gift, such a beautiful gift. Usui, said that we do
I don't have an answer for that. Is there something else I can help with?
she loves talking to me, that
I
Siri.
think what it is when you say usui, it thinks you're saying Siri.
Did I say that? Did I say?
You said usui, and that's when she piped up.
I bet that's what happened before when that's happened.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. Whenever you say that name, Siri thinks you're saying Siri.
Anyway,
We're not talking about you, Siri.
it's not always about you. So yeah, but Usui said that you need to heal yourself before you can heal others, which is we can always, when we talk about the individual, that brings us very much to that point, and that we are individuals and we really need to work on ourselves. And when we feel that sense of home, as you're saying, we need to bring that in more and more and more in whatever way that we can, because it brings us back into that state of equilibrium and wholeness. And from that space, obviously, we are great. We are gregarious beings, so we have this great natural way of having to be with each other. And if we are whole, then we can really be balanced and share that balance out with others around us. And it's not as easy as it sounds, because oftentimes we're sharing our anger and we're sharing all the wrong stuff. So really allowing ourselves to be in that space and be there, and not be worried about things, and just to sit back into that beautiful space. Another thing that you mentioned was about when we were talking about the labyrinth, and going into this center, and when we look at the system of Reiki, yes, with Joshin kokyu, we have this idea that, you know, we're breathing into the center and then we're allowing that to move out. And we can see that as well with the first symbol and mantra. So the translation of the first symbol, chokurei, means direct to kami, you know. So direct to kami means direct to out this essence, this divine essence within us. And when we practice, we nourish that essence. And we're nourishing this. It sort of feels almost it feels almost womb-like, and it feels, for me, when I talk about it, you know, and which, if we're talking about labyrinths and wombs, so, you know, you could say everything is interconnected, and in some way we could bring it around to be interconnected. But so, you know, breathing in, nourishing this divineness inside of ourselves when we are in that beautiful natural flow, and we're allowing that divineness then to be us and to be shared in this world. So yeah
That's really beautiful. There's this piece that often comes up, sometimes comes up for students when I'm teaching to interconnection and about the way that Reiki guides us towards our remembering and our felt sense of our inherent interconnection. And it's a really vulnerable piece that I'm always so grateful when people are willing to share. And I've learned to kind of name it, even if people aren't sharing about it, which is that thinking about and focusing our attention on interconnection can be really scary. It can bring up aversions. It can bring up, it can bring up the idea that there are people we don't want to be connected with, right? There's people who have hurt us. There's people who we consider to be bad or evil or harmful, you know, that have wreaked havoc in our life, perhaps. And the idea that we're interconnected with even those people, right? All of everything, it can be really challenging, right? And it can be a real impediment to going into the practices. Because if you're like, well, I don't want to go there, right? I need a barrier there. And this holding this paradox, this non-dual space around my sovereignty, my individuality, at the same time, my interconnection, has been a real remedy to that, I have found. And so I wanted to speak to it in case anything like that is coming up for folks as you're listening. And the idea, you know, it really tracks onto the Buddhist principles of relative reality and ultimate reality. So the relative reality is that sovereign, personal, individual experience that we have as of ourself, as in this lifetime, in this body, in this time and place, and all of the things that add up to our life and our personality and who we are. And in the scheme of our relative reality, we have all of these relationships and all of these connections with other people, some of which are hurtful, problematic, harmful. And in that scope of our relative reality, we need to take care of ourselves and keep ourselves safe. And that might mean putting boundaries between us and other people and not seeing those people, or moving away from them, or getting restraining orders against them, or, you know, whatever the case may be, right? There's boundariedness that needs to happen when we're talking about the relative reality of our body and our individual life. At the same time, there's the ultimate reality, which is what we're speaking to, that includes interconnection and the idea of the web of life and all of us as part of this larger than us life, right? That has existed long before this body and will exist long after this body. And it's in that space that we're talking about interconnection, that we are all one, that we are all connected. In that space, we're not hurting each other. In that space, we're not causing problems and chaos for each other. In that space, we're feeling the trueness of each other, right? The goodness, the inherent goodness that each of us is what is present in that space, and not all of the bullshit of our individual lives. And so, you know, I think it's been an important I'm thinking about this in a new way in light of this conversation, that the knowledge and the experience and affirming our sovereignty and our self-responsibility and our right to safety and our right to making choices about our life and who we interact with and such is an important medicine, an important tool, important structure to help us ease into the interconnection piece. Because if we're afraid of interconnection in our daily life, then it's going to be really hard to lean into it in our spiritual practice. And so there's a way in which keeping an awareness of those two different spheres, but that they all still coexist inside of me at the same time, has been helpful for that dynamic. Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to name that piece.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really helpful way to see it, because so many people do say, you know, oh, but no, I need to protect myself. And it's like, but what are they protecting themselves against? Yeah. So if we're protecting ourselves from feeling that sense of interconnection with everyone on a spiritual level, well, that means that we are going to be putting up boundaries that are going to stop us from actually developing spiritually. Yeah. So we're not going to be able to, we're not going to want to be able to sense that interconnection with our world. And when we talk about this awareness and consciousness that we are growing as we travel the labyrinth, right? That consciousness and that learning, the learning isn't there, and we're stunting ourselves. So finding ways, and I think that's a really helpful way, using the two truths to give us that understanding that, yes, okay, we need to look after ourselves. Of course we need to look after ourselves. It's a bit like when we talk about anger. You know, a lot of people say, oh, you know, but I need anger. I have to be angry because, you know, when, you know, if people are hurting animals, surely it's my anger that's going to stop that and motivate me. Well, I mean, anger is something that is uncontrolled. So it's not really an understanding of what's going on. We don't want to be uncontrolled. We actually want to have all our wits with us, and we want to be able to be really together, and that's not anger. Yeah, it's something else. And so learning about ourselves and learning how we react, why we react, how we can do it well, these are things that we learn as we go along, and we don't know when we're little babies, right? We don't need to know when we're little babies. And maybe when we're old and going, you know, maybe we don't need that then either.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And the idea that, you know, again, back to the idea of this is not a all or nothing game. It's not like either you're, you know, totally oblivious and living a life of suffering, or you're enlightened, right? That it's this cyclical journey where you're circling around, you're walking that labyrinth again and again and again. We get to make choices about where we push our comfort level, right? We have to push our comfort level in order to grow and change. You know, we have to stretch and get a little uncomfortable, or maybe a lot uncomfortable. And, you know, like, growth and change generally involves discomfort. And at the same time, we get to make choices about the pace at which we make ourselves uncomfortable, the amount of which, how much of a leap we want to take on a given day, you know, how much of that labyrinth, how big of a labyrinth we're going to walk on a given day. And that is true when we're working with anger. It's true when we're wanting to lean into interconnection. And so, you know, back to the challenge with the sometimes pain of leaning into interconnection when we're coming at it from our relative reality, which includes not just connection with people, but even, you know, with the world. I had this come up when I taught a class that used a particular breathing meditation practice to connect with trees. And one of my participants was in a drought area, and the trees in her area were in a lot of pain. And so having this connecting practice with trees in that moment, was something that she had to work with. She was very grateful for it. She was ready to lean into the discomfort of that and to face it and to look at it and to say, okay, as a web of life, here is a part of the web that's hurting. And I'm a part of that. I'm not separate from that. I'm a part of it, right? She was ready to do that work. But we get to choose, right? And so for others, if thinking about interconnection with all people or particular things that feel really painful or affronting, it's just too much, it's perfectly fine to not go there yet. I'm working through the Book of Joy with a group of people. I lead a class walking through that book from time to time. And a lot of the meditations that have you lean into, for example, connecting with the suffering of other people or extending compassion in the midst of suffering, it has you go through this spiral where that starts with the low-hanging fruit, the easiest thing, right? Connection with somebody that you really love and already like, right? Or connection with a type of suffering that's mild, and then expanding essentially increasing the difficulty as you go spiral through the meditation. And that can happen in a single sitting. You have a good long meditative sit and you spiral through these ever increasing circles of connection into more difficult territory, where it might happen over a long period of time, right? You might practice your interconnection muscle with things that are just easy and joyful to feel connected to, your pets, your garden, your loved ones, whatever it is, the sky, whatever feels good to connect to. And you build your muscle of even leaning into that concept, right? Like feeling it in yourself. And then when you're ready, you expand into deeper, more challenging levels of interconnection once you've built up enough capacity, enough strength. Knowing, though, that if we are going to grow and we are going to evolve as individuals and as a collective, at some point we got to get uncomfortable. But we want to be well equipped to navigate that discomfort so that we don't just pitch off the edge and give it up.
Yeah, it's like going to the gym.
Exactly. You got to start with your 5-pound dumbbells, work your way on up.
Oh, good
Stuff. Yeah, this concept is it's so central, it's so fundamental to the spiritual, philosophical, cultural foundations of Reiki. And it's one that I think it's it's one of those concepts, one of those terms, interconnection, that can get kind of bandied about in spiritual communities, and used in different ways. But it really bears spending the time to really root into, but what do we actually mean by that? What do we really mean by interconnection? What do we mean by interdependence and independence? Because language, it really matters. I think about this all the time in teaching a practice that is from a culture that's not my own, that's being translated from another language. I think a lot about the imperfection of language, the importance of being clear about what we mean. And that happens in a lot of different contexts. And just kind of circling us back to Independence Day, it's named that because it's celebrating a specific historical event, the moment when the United States became independent as a country from Britain. But the word independence has seeped into our psyche so deeply over the years since that original impulse of independence happened in this nation, that it's become part of our identity of being independent, of being separate and individual. And it's like our reliance on that word has caused us to, I think, live very separate, isolated lives. I think it's gotten into our behavior and into our thinking and into our identity in a way that doesn't actually serve us well. And so, I have been a proponent for a long time of actually renaming the holiday to Interdependence Day, because we can still celebrate the history of how the country came to be. Can we also acknowledge the really painful parts of that history? Some of us can, right? There's a lot of complexity to that history. But if we look at really what we need as a nation, a lot more collaboration, a lot more connection, a lot more reliance on each other, a lot more trust, a lot more interconnection is what would actually serve us as a nation to be strong, resilient, kind, sustainable, to continue being a leader, or maybe retain our identity as leaders in the world towards goodness. I think we could use a reframe. I think that the word independence as a national icon, as a symbol of our identity as a nation, is not actually serving us. Not sure that it ever has. So this is my pitch to changing the 4th of July to Interdependence Day, for what that's worth. At the very least, we can celebrate it right here on Reiki Women Podcast.
Okay. We should be voting for you, Michaela. That should be your pitch.
Oh my God, I want no part of that. But friends, we would love to hear your experiences with the concept of interconnection. What comes up for you when you think about that? What experiences have you had spiritually, socially, with the concept of interconnection? And are you on board with my campaign to change Independence Day to Interdependence Day? Let me know in the comments down below. And go ahead and share this podcast with folks that you think would benefit from this conversation. This feels like such an important point of focus for us, not just as Reiki people, but as people. And so I'm really glad to have had this conversation with you, Bronwen, and with you, dear listeners. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back with you next week.
All right.
We love you.